In this presentation, I'm going to be reviewing two presentations by Danny, which are on the presentation menu in the forum, numbers 9 and 10. Danny was the most recent budgie we had. He started talking within weeks of him arriving with us in 2017. However, he was inflicted with an incurable illness that the vet could not find a solution for, and he was only with us for about a year. Victor was the first, and he was with us for about 3 years, from 1997 to 2001 or so. Then approximately 10 years later, Maylor came, which was around 2009, and then Danny, who some people think is the clearest talking budgie that blessed us with his presence so far. The first video I'm going to talk about today by Danny is called The Bloodline. In it he talks about how my DNA is connected to a long line of prophets, and that is one of the reasons I'm able to hear the angels speak. Shortly after I translated this video, I decided to get a DNA test, which came up with some very interesting results, which I reviewed in presentation 28 in the forum. In the first part, Danny talks about what people, or even myself, should say to the media if they acknowledge that the angels are communicating through the budgies. He says, "You might just say to the media, what you gonna do if heaven will control you while you report?" And then he mentions you might ask him, do you have any intentions of fighting evil? We have them to work on in the future, right? In the next clip, I talk in reverse mostly, and ask a question about it being my right to evolve through a religion of my choice. This is what is said. You've got to say to them, surely, is it not my right if my life can still evolve through religion? In the next clip, Danny talks about how I will know which media sources and perhaps be in contact with ones that will observe this religion in a positive manner. He says, in spirit, Ryan will know a portion of the main ones that will be coming out with messages in a spiritual way. Much of this recording is filled with prophecy that has not come to fruition yet, as far as I know. In the next part, he talks about how some will trust, believe, and seek the answers. He says, eventually, they'll trust and believe that Ryan will seek all the answers. Most will get shown it's their right to find enjoyment. In the next clip, he talks about how I will need to know that the people that come here are here to help, and says, these people here will get to cooperate with Ryan, as long as he can know that they really help, and he must know they're trusting. In the next part, he talks about how people will have to pay attention so they can witness the miracles, and says, everyone will have to pay attention. Once you know a real miracle, you'll never forget. In reference to what he said last, people should know that this is just the beginning. Even though we are having the angels communicate to us right now in miraculous ways, there will be more advanced miracles as we have some people participating. The inertia which they bring will help move this religion to the next level. Then he talks about how the questions will help develop wisdom and positive morals in people. He says, we'll use the questions that we're getting, and they'll enlighten you. There mustn't be any fear that we change morals. So in other words, the angels will not change someone who has good morals to something that is bad. And I think you'll get to trust that as you hear more from the angels. Next, he talks about how the questions that will come from leaders of other religions and how they will make some real changes in their religion when they get the answers. And says, there are questions for a change of religions, and there will be many whose changes are real. Next, he talks about how unlimited passion can bring about dreams and says, hopefully, they won't forget that whenever you can, it's time for you to live your dream when you have unlimited passion. In the next part, he talks about how right now we have miracles helping, and soon other budgies will come to help as well, and says, at this point you will have miracles helping. It's time that many budgies come for this work. In the next part, he talks about how the captions can teach what God wants us to know, and that it's your choice if you want to listen. He says, the captions teach in spirit from God. I have to tell you, it's really your choice. Then you can change for a reason. In the next sentence, he talks about how he is speaking through the ring of time and how there will be more in the future, and says, and through the ring of time, it's welcomed as we get more on the next project. In the last part, Danny talked about the next project. I believe it will come when the next group of budgies and their guardians come. In Sentinels of the Future, Victor talked about how these budgies will come from all over the world, giving us advance warning on natural disasters, which will enable us to save life. So he says, the truth is, in time, this will involve all of them who are helping you. You'll see and realize the miracle now you are living. In the next part, I'm not sure whether Danny is talking about my guardian angels or the guardians of the new budgies, but this is what he says. Ryan's guardians can know when to inform you that our soul visits everywhere to see what's going on. Following that, he talks to the people who attempt to learn here and says that the angels will be present with them and they will know when they are speaking to them personally. He says, if you'll attempt to learn, there's a chance we will be present. You'll be able to spiritually know when we are speaking to you. Next, he talks about how this type of passion will release divine miracles that are followed by actions that make these prophecies come to fruition, and says, if passion releases divine miracles, you'll notice they're followed by actions that make the prophecy happen. In the next part, he talks about how the miracles make a process to get to heaven, and how Victor let me know he was receiving spiritual knowledge. And he said, "Make a process to get to heaven." Thank little Victor for telling Ryan he was receiving knowledge on a spiritual plateau. Then he talks about how this will be connected to the Christian Bible and that Christians will be helping, and says, "We're glad what we have viewed. We can explain. Connected to him and the Christian Bible, we know Christians will be helping." Next, he tells us how to trust what we have learned here, because what some religions think could be all wrong. So he says, "Trust what you have here with them, and many will console you. What they think and currently have could be all wrong." Following that, he talks about some of the things that they will do for these religions that come, and says, "We'll give advice with encouragement for what they choose to do here and all over the world." In the next clip, he talks about how we can reverse problems and fight evil through this religion. He says, "And if you have problems, we may reverse it all through this religion instead of us continually fighting this evil." Then he talks about people who show support in this but are not up to committing to it completely, and says, "There's many we see are good friends of yours that aren't up to this, but showed support in what you do." Following that, he talks about how some people may think that this religion is not possible, and how the angels will help those have faith in it for the future, and says, "You'll have to look at everything. Just by account, we're giving more faith in new people that fear they are looking at a dream that is barely survivable." Then he talks about how the angels are relaying knowledge to me that will not cost you anything, and how the lessons exist in heaven, and says, "That knowledge we relay to Ryan will be free. The lessons he made with passion exist in heaven with prophecy." In the next part, Danny talks about how the angels can get budgies to help us, and says, "Often we can get a talking budgie to connect to all we're doing. We help them to connect with real conviction that they know is chose by our God and backed by God's truth." Then he talks about how rare this mission is and how we can teach a process, and says, "No one's had this mission for years. Teaching a process where you attend a convention with a prophet." In the next part, he talks about the connection that my bloodline has to the prophets, and says, "The angels have his help, and we'll be looking for budgies who talk and connect the bloodline Adam Cadman to help the world. I first heard of this connection about 10 years ago when I was prompted by the budgies to do some research on Adam Cadman. When I did, I found there is a connection to an ancient prophecy of a new religion in the Kabbalah. Also, my grandfather on my mother's side and my mother's maiden name was Cadman. My grandfather was a Hungarian Jew who came to Canada in the early 1900s. Although my DNA test did not focus on my grandfather's bloodline, when I did the test, I found there were other significant connections. For example, Emanuel Swedenborg was a relative of mine. Although it was a little hard to hear what Danny said in the last part, he makes it a little more clear in the next part and says, they have a prophecy in the Kabbalah of something spiritual, and the budgies say it's believable. Whatever is in your bloodline lives and gives you a spiritual connection to God. And he continues on with how there will be those seeking this connection and says, and you'll hear of people seeking this when Ryan has briefings from heaven, and this blood can be acting for the force of nature. Next, he talks about how the time is near when heaven helps humanity, and how people find a spiritual connection to me when I talk, as we communicate in reverse consistently, and says, we're getting close to a time when heaven helps the world. We have shown you Ryan as he was talking. When he communicates, those around him find a spiritual connection in reverse. In the next part, the angels talk about what they feel is a real religion and say, let us tell you, we define a real religion as we angels communicating from heaven. In the next part, he talks about how those coming will follow the miracles and how they will live when more people get involved. It says, most of you coming follow the miracles when Ryan posts a clear reversal. The recordings you're experiencing can live when you've got some involved. Next, he talks about how I will feel much better when other buddies come to help, and says, Ryan, we'll have you eventually a real reunion with all the budgies that love you, and you will feel normal. You may be wondering why the budgies are repeating similar things at times. There is a reason, for it's because they know that you may not be able to hear certain things as I translate them, so they put it in another similar statement in a way to confirm what has already been sent. Hopefully, if you do not pick up the gist of what they were saying the first time, you may be able to the second or third time similar things are said. So this is what he said next. We'd like you to see how angels are providing proof, and for the first time lessons, and heaven is certainly communicating. Another reason why they might be saying similar things is because they have seen these presentations in heaven and know the parts that were a little fuzzy and want to make sure that more people can hear this important testimony. So in the next part, he talks about how this is not a fantasy and that the angels are offering you a magical journey to heaven. And he says, it cannot be a type of fantasy. If you all knew we offer you a beautiful trip always in heaven, would you truly return for the assignment? Then he mentions how the angels are verifying that the soul in heaven exists, and they want you to know what's waiting for you. He says, it's usually better for the soul as well. There's some commotion when everyone knows the trip has now been verified. With Ryan's help, you will get to know it's waiting for you. In the next part, he talks about how each of you have a chance to witness the answers to humanity's questions if you have the time, and says, we all had a chance to elect questions, which will be here and work for Ryan. Do you have the time to try and believe in a solution to humanity's questions? One of the things that I've learned from the angels in the past is that evil runs from the truth, and Danny touches on that here and says, you will find obviously your God will be there during the work. With the right passion, you'll have a chance where many of your points could be a lesson we need to break the evil evolving. In the next part, he talks to a person named Ray, who I have not heard from yet, but I'm confident that he'll contact me at some point in the future. And says, if you now believe and listen, others will believe in your passion. Ray, we spoke to you. I know. We can help you find your heaven. I believe he is still talking to Ray and perhaps others when he says, now you know, we deploy the timing made by the Word of God. Help this man be a part of our light spiritually near your heaven. Next, he talks about a light of pure love that flows from God and says, see the light that glows with pure love from a valid source of God that will allow an indication of your mission. In the remaining parts, he talks about how important this is to God and the angels. It says, most of the time, the many who work in heaven cherish what we are doing. Don't expect it'll possibly be over. In the last part of this, he expresses again how important this is to God and says, right now, there's nothing else that pleases God more. Then he giggles a little bit and says, when you need a break, you have it. In presentation 10, Danny talks about how prophecy comes to fruition, and this video even speaks a little bit about animal rights. In the first clip of this video, I talk in reverse about people that hurt animals. First off, Danny says, you will miss me. And then I say, usually it's normal to fine all the criminals that hurt the animals. So why did they let it occur every day?
Lord. Okay, you're recording. Want me to go down and show them that? Okay. That's the one I'm working on now. It's a long one. No, but... Oh, I'm not a girl, man. I was the... Yeah, and was... I do get him up.
The next part is where he talks about how some prophecy will give you a path, and if you follow it, you will have results. And he says, a hero will be helping many. Sure, some prophecy requires some kind of principal act, so you will get a path that shows results.
Yep. Is there something you want to tell me, Danny?
In the next part, he continues talking about how people need passion in something to make it happen when it's supported by God. He says, you have to find a way to increase the passion so you can't have some confusion. And then they must know the wind rushes in that direction.
You know, you must know wind rushes.
Next, Danny and I talk about how you'll be able to see it all and not have fear if you have love in your heart. We say, while looking, see everything. You'll lose your fear as you remain with love.
See it, lost your fear, you remain.
In the next part, we talk about how some humans and budgies have the same talent, and people should believe eventually that it is a normal way of communicating with God and the angels. So we say, if your love lives with God, He is here now. What we have here is actually one of our talents. You entirely should believe that Ryan will challenge what most of you feel in the past is conventionally normal.
You sure out liberal.
Next, he talks about when people gain this knowledge, they can count on growth. He also talks about people working with God who are helping God to intervene so He can reverse the suffering. And he says, you'll count on growth once you get this knowledge. Some of the people who know that there is suffering are working with God. We're on the brink of some intervention that can really reverse it. Then Danny talks about how they have chose to offer their talents and provide evidence of it, and says, we have chosen to now offer our talents. You might try to help. Evidence will be the theme we are giving to him. In the next part, Danny talks so fast that I almost left it out, but I thought it was important, so I did. And he says, it's a Bible that we can pass to earth. We are angels who are working with God to offer our help. There are so many who are prepared now to give their help. The next part too is fast because it is the reverse of what he just said in the last part. In it he talks about how spiritual evolution can stop suffering. And he says, it's possible to stop suffering when we have found solutions for human spiritual evolution. While we traverse time, we offer you a vision.
Fast, it's a little bit fast. It was fast for me.
If you ever wondered what the angel's mission is, the next part should clear it up when he says, we are pleased to adorn you with a religion from heaven. This whole time we'd like to cooperate and pass on our knowledge. The next part is quite remarkable when he clearly says my name in reverse and then talks about how God is here defending Earth. He says, you have lessons, Ryan Reynolds. Many of these lessons merit your help. These angels will mean God simply here defending our Earth. He continues by telling people that Earth needs God's help, and he is serious. He also talks about how the Earth's growing race will need this knowledge. He says, it's very clear that it could use some help. So I ain't kidding. There's a lot that you can learn. The day is coming for us to give knowledge for this growing race. Then he talks about how a new religion like this would normally need apostles to help that are inspired by God. And he says, and you'll see when we give you some prophecy, God thinks you deserve seasoned healing. During this time, you would usually need apostles for this event that speak and are inspired by God. Then he talks about how God and the angels cannot sit by and let humanity be affected this way and says, we cannot sit still if we can save your day. When angels communicate, you will hear the angels free these lessons of your God for your plight here. And then I speak in reverse and say, for if you want, you can always know the truth, for we all search in every way.
If you're finished, just fly away. Or if you want to keep on talking, I'll wait for you. Hey, if you want to pass now, we can always roll. Here we are, sit in every.
Then he talks about how God knows it's time for his intervention and how we need a forum where we can help our souls to evolve. And he says, yes, God's finally for more intervention. We need a spiritual forum where we can help our souls.
Linda just left. She left the room. She should be back in a minute.
He continues with clearly identifying how modern-day prophecy can help us get out of confusion, and says, and then with God we'll see how modern prophecy helps us to know when you get confusion.
And then when I've said the new. Is this going to be one of your favorite spots on top of the computer to record? Do you think?
Even though the next part is not that clear for most people, it was too important again to leave out. He says, yes, the future is changing. Be spiritual, be spiritual, be spiritual. Your God can give you a miracle. With a spiritual change in you, he can give you some spiritual evolution intervention.
You gotta talk so.
Next he mentions how we need to evolve in hearing the truth and how we need to seek solutions when nature is going in the wrong direction and beginning to cause much death. And he says, I'd like you to evolve in hearing and hear a promise from heaven. We feel when nature is known to stop life, we better seek solutions.
I can understand you.
In the final part, I chose this last clip of me speaking in reverse and say, we are all here to surely do our part now. In this house, every friend now will receive. I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that there would be prophecy and that the angels would explain my relationship to the bloodline of the prophets. Yes, we all are connected in some way or other to the same bloodline. However, there are ones that have a more direct connection to it, and I guess I'm blessed to be one of them. You know, I did not ask for this though, and actually questioned it and fought the connection for almost 10 years. It was only after many budgies telling me these same things over and over again that I finally came to believe it myself. Yes, it is true that God and the angels want living prophecy and have chosen me to help them in a new religion. This religion will not only have current and updated knowledge from God, but it will lead humanity to the next step of their spiritual evolution and help to protect humanity's future. If by now you cannot see and hear that the angels are consistently communicating in both forward and reverse here, then this may not be meant for you. However, if you can even hear 50% of what I translate, you cannot deny that there is something miraculous happening, and we really need to pay attention to what the angels are saying. Thanks for listening, and I hope you return for the next presentation that will be continuing from where I left off. Bye for now.
That completes this presentation. To hear more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit our website at theangelscrolls.com.